Welcome to the Swamp, CONAN Exiles, one of, if not my favorite survival game of all time, with over 24 hours spent playing this game. However, a good 95% of those hours were spent on the main map, the Exiled Lands, with the other 5% on other maps, a bit of Savage Wilds, a bit of Kalimdor Exiles mod, but I did buy and play on the official DLC, Isle of SIPTAH. However, it was brief. I always ended up returning to the main map. However, I decided to give it another chance, and I'm going to dedicate my first DLC review to this map. I shall rate it on categories like usual, but as both an addition to the game as well as a standalone adventure. If you wish to see the review of the main game itself, I will provide a link in the description below. Now let's dive into the DLC and see how it is. My name is Excalligator. I rate games based on many categories that would fit into most survival games, based on a 1 to 5 system. If a category does not apply, it will not affect the game's overall score. Now let us get started. The Isle of SIPTAH is the only official DLC map added to CONAN Exiles, where instead of being exiled into the Exiled Lands, you are enslaved and on your way to those lands, but a storm hits your ship and is destroyed, washing you up onto the shores of an unknown island of magic and danger. It is now your job to survive and find a way off of the island. Real quick, I will let you know that I did play with some mods, which was Fashionist, which lets me transmog my armor. I had IQOL for some different HUD layouts, and a few other smaller cosmetic mods. I did also have Kalimdor Exiles mod and Exiles Extreme, but I did not use them during this playthrough. Now then, with the start of the game, instead of a fully animated opening, you are instead giving an animatic opening with the ship being sunk in the storm. You create your character prior to that and start off on the beach. Similar to Ark, the beach will be the safest place on the map, as the rest of the island only gets harder the further inland you go. However, that does not mean the beach is safe itself. Wild dogs roam the beaches and some other exiles you can find, and none of them are friendly. The beach is the equivalent of Noob River on the main map, but I feel the start of this game is much harder. There are very few and even limited resources on the beach, but stepping foot off of the beach you are instantly greeted with much higher leveled mobs, so you have to avoid all contact if possible to get enough metal and such to upgrade your character before you can even hope to explore further. Or you could cheese it like I did and kill a bunch of low-level sorcerers and turn in their skulls for a free legendary weapon that destroys all low and mid-leveled enemies with ease. But besides that little trick, it was a lot harder to get a foothold as a solo player on this game compared to the main game. I'll go ahead and rate it a 4 out of 5. There was a lot more to this opening that made it a fun experience, but is best saved for the exploration part. The only downside is that you were progressively restricted to the beach for a long time before you could take on anything further in. DLC, as it stands, are meant to add on to the original game, sometimes as a whole and sometimes exclusive to the newer maps. The same can be said here for both arguments. There are things on this map that are overall better experience to the original map, but some newer systems were translated over as well. One of which was the ability to tame and mount up on rhinos. The ability to ride on a rhino into battle was added with the DLC, but you can use it on the original map as well. Though the other side of the coin is that many animals and creatures are exclusively found on Isle of SIPTAH and not in the Exiled Lands. Modded maps like Savage Wilds blends both maps in beautifully, but that'll be for another video. Besides the creatures, I found way more interactive items in the world on SIPTAH. On Exiled Lands, you can occasionally find a note or a letter of lore and world building, clues and teaching you recipes, but sometimes just an item you could pick up and use. I found grave sites that need shovels to dig up and so on. This section, I think I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. It adds a lot to the game, but most of it remains exclusive on the SIPTAH map, and I feel some of it should be allowed on the original Exiled map as well, just for the fun factor. The exploration, I think, is going to be my least favorite part of this review. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a lot that this DLC gets right about it, but one thing in particular brings it down a lot. But let's start off with the good stuff first. Just like the original map, there are tons of locations that are both primary points of interest as well as hidden areas that make you want to explore further and delve into the chasms to see what treasure await you. I already talked about new various interactable items that you can find out in the world. One of them are the baby sea turtles you find on the beach, and you can pick up and eat them, or you can tame them as pets. The water for the beach and the ocean look amazing. There are new introduced biomes like the grasslands and redwoods. Everyone loves redwood forests with massive trees that look older than Jesus. Here there is even a friendly town you can visit and find other canon characters. It is not Conan this time, but if you are familiar with the lore, it will be someone familiar to you. Now for my issues. I have two main issues with the map that are both similar in nature. That is, the lack of variety in aesthetics. While yes, I did mention that there are new biomes like the redwoods, it is still just a forest. With the exception of the mountains, the map is pretty much all just forest, grasslands, and beach. While the original map had desert, jungle, highland, snow, lava, with so many areas that looked and felt different from the color tones, and then how they felt and interacted with the character, even with the temperature systems, here, the map is just basically 3 biomes that all are kind of bland, and is almost always in a constant washed out gray tone, like a modern movie. It also doesn't help that the main dungeons are all aesthetically the same. The Exile dungeons all had different themes, different enemies. Here, while the enemies are somewhat different, they are still also the same, basically. Even though one dungeon has snake men and another one has wolf men, they all function and act the same. And they all have the same ancient stone building theme with the same sigils and stone carvings. The puzzles, while there are a few of them, they're not that exciting nor challenging. This whole section is just kind of meh, so I'm gonna rate it a 2.5 out of 5. Again, there are things that I like, but overall the repetitive nature of this map really wore me down quick compared to the variety of the original map. The survival in terms of actual survival mechanics like eating and drinking is really not that bad. The food is a bit of a non-issue as you get so much food from killing enemies. Water is easy at the start since you can drink seawater for some reason, but the further into the map you go, there are little to no ponds for water, so keeping a water skin with you is beneficial. Now, while I don't have a PvE section on this video, I've already said it's definitely much harder in this map to progress than the original map. All of the enemies are tuned up, and even geared tier 3 and even named thralls, we still died frequently, and I've even had several thralls die. Now, I mentioned the further inland you go, the more dangerous it becomes. It's the same for vertically, as the higher on the mountains you go, the enemies are also difficult. But something that is new to this map that is also exclusive is the Maelstrom event. The Maelstrom happens every so often, with similar to the Sandstorm. You will see how the wind picks up and the trees shake. That is your warning to get out of the center of the island as quick as you can, as this only affects the center of the map. The beaches are safe. When the Maelstrom hits, it hits with a combination of both sandstorms and purges. The screen will become obscured and newer, more demonic creatures will spawn. Some of these demons that spawn are world bosses, and they can destroy your base if you're not prepared. So there's definitely an added level of difficulty for the PvE with the bosses raiding your base and such. I would say the survival overall is a 3.5 out of 5. There is difficulty, but the survival elements themselves are a non-issue, so it kind of balances out. This game is not a story-driven game, as the DLC follows the same pattern. The main story is to escape. That's pretty much it. Now, that doesn't mean that there is no lore to discover. Just as the original map, there are tons of little notes and runestones to flavor and fill in the world with lore. With that knowledge, the SIPTAH lore you can find within the map expands upon the lore of the game overall, and an example is the story of the Snake Men. In the first map, you find the Snake Men in the volcano dungeon with a cult of humans that worship them. According to some flavor text and the runestones in SIPTAH, you can find out that they used to enslave humans a long time ago, until an uprising occurred and they fled to the Isle of SIPTAH, with the other elder races like spiders and wolfmen and so on to escape the humans from their slaughter. The Maelstrom you see often was to prevent humans from invading them, which is why you see so many shipwrecks. From there, they try to repopulate the island, but it wasn't allowing their eggs to hatch due to the temperature. However, the remaining snake men on the mainland, aka the exiled lands, had managed to get their eggs to hatch with the power of a magical artifact, being the one that you take from the boss battle of the volcano dungeon, so it ties in nicely with the overall game's lore. And that's just the snake men. There are 6 other elder races on SIPTAH with similar stories for you to discover. Even so, though this is not a story-driven game, the fact that there is still lore to discover and it ties in well, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 4.5 out of 5. While this game can be run on a middle-of-the-road computer, I highly recommend playing it on a higher-end computer. While on a solo server, it runs fairly well. On multiplayer servers, I've had way more issues with frame rate and lag, but even then, just to have the higher graphics is worth it. I played many hours on this game just on medium settings, but after I upgraded my computer and played on max settings, it's really hard to go back. The sand being reactive to when you walk through it, to the foliage and water textures, though it is not without its glitches. Now, while this doesn't happen every time, lately, as I've been loading in, everything will be purple before the loaded textures pop in. Sometimes while loading up the server, you can get stuck on a tile piece from a building. That is more common in multiplayer, not so much in solo. Just like the first map, creatures can just randomly fly into the air and then zap back down later on, or just have issues processing that you are even next to them before it finally reacts to your presence. I'm gonna rate this a 4 out of 5. It has flaws and issues, but I never had it where it was unplayable in solo mode, and most issues you do find are typically because of mods and are fixable. My overall score for the Isle of SIPTAH DLC for CONAN Exiles is going to be a 3.6 out of 5. It is very fun and playable with a lot of additions that add to the overall game of the original map. While not my favorite map compared to the modded maps, it still has a lot of things that are good about it. I would say if you were wondering if you should buy the SIPTAH DLC or not, my response would be only if you want to. This is not a must-buy, as you can get free modded maps like Savage Wilds, which combines all of the good things of the Exiled Lands and the SIPTAH map into one large map. But anyway, that is the end of my review. I hope you enjoyed the DLC review. I would like to eventually review some modded maps and even other DLC maps like from Ark. Until then, be sure to like and subscribe, and I shall see you next time. And that is the end of this video. If you liked my review, please subscribe to this channel, as I will be making more in-depth reviews of open-world sandbox survival RPG games, including those that no one ever talks about from the deepest, darkest depths of Steam. Some games that even look like the muck at the bottom of my pond. If you have any suggestions for what game to do next, please comment below and like this video. Florida Gator Man out.